While I was taking out the trash last Tuesday night, my neighbor, Mrs. Higgins, walked over looking terrified. "I need to tell you something." "Harold," she whispered, her voice trembling. "When you are away on business, a man comes over every night." So I installed a hidden camera and pretended to leave for Chicago at exactly 11 p.m. What I saw on the screen made my blood boil, because they were not just in my bed, they were opening my safe. Before I tell you how I made them pay, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to cut a toxic person out of your life. My name is Harold. I am 69 years old, and until 3 nights ago, I thought I was living the perfect retirement. I built a logistics empire from a single truck in Detroit to a fleet that covers all of North America. I spent 40 years fighting unions, navigating hostile takeovers, and surviving recessions. I thought I knew what sharks looked like, but it turns out the most dangerous. Sharks do not swim in the ocean. They sleep in your bed and eat at your dinner table. It was a Tuesday night, a typical cold November evening in Connecticut. The kind of damp cold that seeps into your bones and reminds you that you are getting older. I had just finished watching the market close reports, and Linda, my wife of 10 years, had gone up to bed early, complaining of a migraine. Linda is 58, 11 years my junior. Beautiful in a way that requires a lot of maintenance and money. She had been distant lately, but I chalked it up to the changing seasons, or perhaps my own snoring. I grabbed the garbage bags from the kitchen. The house was silent. The marble floors echoed under my slippers. It is a large house, 5 bedrooms for just 2 people. Too much space, really, but Linda insisted on the colonial estate in Greenwich. She said it signaled status. I walked out to the curb, the cold air hitting my face like a slap. The streetlights were dim, casting long shadows across the manicured lawns. That was when I heard the click of garden shears. It was 11 at night. Who prunes hydrangeas at 11 at night? I turned and saw Mrs. Higgins standing by the hedge that separates our properties. She is a widow, 72 years old, the kind of woman who knows exactly when the mailman arrives and which neighbor is late on their HOA fees. Usually I avoid her, but tonight she waved me over urgently. "Harold, come here," she hissed, glancing toward my house as if the windows had ears. I walked over, gripping the cold plastic of the trash bag. Mrs. Higgins looked pale underneath the street lamp. "Listen, I have debated telling you this for a month." She started wringing her gloved hands. "I know you think I am just a busybody, but I like you, Harold. You are a good man. You do not deserve to be played for a fool." My stomach tightened. That specific instinct I used to get before a deal went south flared up. "What are you talking about, Martha?" I asked, keeping my voice low. She took a breath. "When you go on those consulting trips to Chicago or Florida, about 15 minutes after your town car leaves, a red Mustang pulls up. Not in the driveway, but down the street. The man walks to your side door. He has a key, Harold. He stays until 3 or 4 in the morning." I felt a physical blow to my chest. A key. A red Mustang. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a delivery, a contractor. But at 3 in the morning with a key, Mrs. Higgins grabbed my arm through my jacket. "He was there last week when you were in Boston. He was there 2 days ago when you went to the golf tournament." "I am sorry." "Harold, but you needed to know." I stared at her, trying to maintain my composure. The CEO mask slipped back into place. "Thank you, Martha," I said, my voice sounding robotic even to my own ears. "I appreciate you telling me." I turned and walked back up the driveway. My legs felt heavy. The house loomed over me, dark and silent, a fortress that had been breached from the inside. I walked into the kitchen and locked the door. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a cold, calculated rage. I poured myself a glass of water and stood in the dark, looking up at the ceiling toward the master bedroom. Linda was up there, sleeping soundly. Or maybe she was pretending. Just like she had been pretending to love me. I did not storm upstairs. I did not wake her up to scream and shout, Screaming is for amateurs. Amateurs get emotional. Professionals get evidence I needed to be a professional. The next morning, I sat at the breakfast table reading the Wall Street Journal, just as I had done for a decade. Linda came down wearing her silk robe, looking refreshed. "Good morning, darling," she said, pouring herself coffee and kissing me on the cheek. Her lips felt like ice. "How is your head?" I asked, not looking up from the paper. "Much better," she smiled. "Harold, before I forget, are you still going to Chicago this weekend for that board meeting?" I paused, taking a sip of my black coffee. I had not planned on going anywhere, but the opportunity had just presented itself. "Yes," I said, folding the newspaper. "Actually, there is a crisis with the merger. The partners need me there by Friday morning. I will probably be gone until Monday." Her eyes lit up for a fraction of a second before she masked it with a pout. "Oh, that is a shame. I was hoping we could go to brunch. But business is business, right?" "Right," I said. "Business is business." As soon as she left for her weekly spa appointment at 10, I made a call. Not to the police and not to a divorce lawyer. I called Russo, my old head of security from the company. Russo retired 2 years ago, but for the right price he still does private consultations. I told him I needed a full sweep and installation, and I needed it done in 3 hours while the lady of the house was getting a mud wrap. Russo arrived in an unmarked van with 2 technicians. I paid them $5,000 in cash, no receipts, no paper trail. "I want eyes everywhere," I told him. The bedroom, the living room, the kitchen, and Russo put one inside the wall safe behind the painting. "The safe?" Russo asked, raising an eyebrow. "That is where the money is, isn't it?" I replied. We installed micro cameras the size of a pinhead. One went into the eye of the teddy bear that sat on the armchair in our bedroom. A bear I had bought her for Valentine's Day, the irony was not lost on me. Another went into the smoke detector in the hallway. And the most important one was drilled discreetly into the interior frame of my wall safe, giving a clear view of the contents. By the time Linda returned from the spa, the house looked exactly as she had left it. Russo and his team were ghosts. I was sitting in the study packing my briefcase. "You are leaving already?" she asked, leaning against the doorframe, looking disappointed. "The car is here," I said. Standing up, I kissed her goodbye. It was the hardest thing I have ever had to do, smelling her expensive perfume, feeling her hand on my arm, and knowing it was all a lie. "Call me when you land," she said, waving from the porch as my car pulled away. I watched her in the rearview mirror until she was just a small speck. She did not look like a wife missing her husband. She looked like a lottery winner holding the ticket. I did not go to the airport. I had the driver take me to the Marriott downtown about 5 miles away. I checked into a suite on the top floor. I set up my laptop on the desk and poured myself a double shot of scotch. Neat. It was 8 p.m. The feed from the cameras was crisp and clear, night vision. Enabled audio synced, I felt like a voyeur in my own life. For 3 hours, nothing happened. Linda watched TV. She ate a salad, she drank 2 glasses of wine. I began to wonder if Mrs. Higgins was wrong. Maybe the man was just a gardener she had seen during the day. Maybe my paranoia was getting the best of me. The clock ticked closer to 11. My heart was hammering against my ribs, distinct and painful. At 10:58, my phone buzzed with a motion alert from the driveway camera. A car pulled up down the street just out of view of the main Ring doorbell, but visible to the long-range lens Russo had mounted in the tree. It was a red Mustang, a late model, flashy loud, the kind of car a young man drives when he wants to look rich but has no equity. A man stepped out. He looked young, maybe late 20s. He was wearing a tight t-shirt that showed off gym muscles and ripped jeans. He walked to the side door with the confidence of an owner. He didn't knock. He pulled a key from his pocket and unlocked the door. The timestamp on the video read 11 p.m. Exactly. I switched the view to the kitchen camera. Linda was already standing there waiting. She was wearing that red silk nightgown, the one she told me was too uncomfortable to sleep in, so she rarely wore it. She didn't kiss him. Instead, she handed him a glass of wine roughly. Finally, she said, "Do you know how hard it is to act like a doting wife when that old fossil is breathing down my neck?" My grip on the Scotch glass tightened so hard I thought it would shatter. Old fossil. Is that what I was to her? A checkbook with a pulse. The man laughed, taking the wine. He had a voice that grated on my nerves, arrogant and nasally. "Relax, babe. Tyler is here to save the day." "Did he sign the papers?" "Not yet." Linda sighed, pacing the kitchen floor. "He is stubborn, Tyler. He says his lawyer needs to review everything first. He is old, but he is not senile yet. We need to push harder." Tyler slammed his glass down on the granite island. "We do not have time, Linda. The investors are breathing down my neck. If I do not get that 50,000 by Monday, I am dead meat. And you are going down with me. Remember who helped you cook the books on your little boutique business." I leaned closer to the screen, my breath caught in my throat. This wasn't just an affair. This was blackmail. This was financial fraud. They walked out of the kitchen, and I switched the camera feed to the master bedroom. They didn't go to the bed. They went straight to the painting on the wall, the one that hid my safe. "Open it," Tyler commanded. Linda hesitated, looking at the door. "He is not coming back, right? He is in Chicago." "Linda, open the damn safe," Tyler snapped, raising his hand as if to strike her. She flinched. That flinch told me everything. This was a toxic, parasitic relationship, and my wife was trapped in the middle of it, but she was willing to salsy out to save herself. She punched in the code. My birthday, how original. The heavy steel door clicked open. I switched the camera view to the interior of the safe. The lens was wide angle, capturing their greedy faces, illuminated by the safe's internal light. They weren't looking for cash or jewelry. They were looking for the blue folder. "Here it is," Linda whispered, pulling out a thick document stack. "This is the power of attorney and the medical conservatorship draft. I practiced the signature, just like you showed me." Tyler snatched the papers from her, scanning them frantically. "Good," he muttered. "If we can get a doctor to sign off on his mental decline, this grants you full control over his assets. We can liquidate the portfolio, transfer the deed to the house, and dump him in a state facility by Christmas." I felt a coldness spread through my veins that was absolute and terrifying. They were not just planning to steal from me, they were planning to erase me. A conservatorship meant I would lose the right to my own money, my own home, even my own freedom. They wanted to paint me as dementia-ridden, incompetent, and lock me away while they had spent my life's savings. Tyler laughed, a cruel, ugly sound. "Look at this. Linda, $20 million in liquid assets, and he spends his weekends watching golf. We are going to live like kings. You just need to slip him the higher dose of the sedative in his coffee when he gets back. Make him shaky, make him slur his words in front of the doctor." I froze. Sedative. I looked at the glass of scotch in my hand and set it down. My hands had been trembling lately. I had been forgetting things, small things, losing my keys, missing appointments. I thought it was age, I thought it was stress, but it was them. They had been poisoning me, drugging me slowly to build a case for my insanity. Linda looked worried. "But what if he notices? The doctor said the side effects are strong." "Just do it," Tyler hissed, grabbing her face, squeezing her cheeks until her lips puckered. "You want to be rich, right? You want to be free of him? Then do what I say. We get the signature, we get the house, we get the money, and then Harold can rot." I sat back in my hotel chair. The anger that had been boiling in my gut suddenly cooled into something solid and hard, like steel. I watched them on the screen, two vultures picking at the carcass of a lion they thought was dead, but the lion was not dead. The lion was watching in high definition, 4K resolution. I reached for my phone and dialed Leonard, my personal attorney and oldest friend. It was nearly midnight, but Leonard picked up on the second ring. "Harold, is everything okay?" he asked, his voice thick with sleep. "Leonard," I said, my voice steady, calm, and deadly, "I need you to wake up. We are not going to Chicago. I need you to draft a new will, and I need you to call the private detective agency you used for the merger audit." "Why?" Leonard asked, fully awake now. "What is going on?" I looked at the screen where Tyler was now kissing Linda violently, possessing her like a prize he had stolen. "I am about to destroy my life, Leonard," I said. "And I am going to need a shovel to bury the bodies, figuratively speaking." I hung up and watched for another hour. I recorded everything. The threats, the plan to overdose me, the forgery practice. They finally fell asleep in my bed, entangled in my sheets, Tyler snoring loudly. Linda curled up away from him, looking small and fearful. But I felt no pity. Not anymore. Pity is for people who make mistakes. These two had made a plan, and tomorrow morning when I walked back through that front door, they would realize that they had messed with the wrong old man. They thought I was the prey, but I have been the predator my whole life, and the hunt was just beginning. I closed the laptop, but I did not sleep. I sat by the window watching the city lights, thinking about the sedative in my coffee and the fake love in my wife's eyes. I formulated a plan. A plan that would not just stop them, but would crush them. It would require me to play the role of a lifetime. I would have to be the senile old fool they wanted me to be. I would let them think they were winning, right up until the moment the trap snapped shut and I pulled my car into the driveway at exactly 9 in the morning on Thursday. The house stood silent and imposing against the gray sky. To anyone passing by, it looked like the perfect sanctuary of a wealthy retired couple. But I knew better. It was a stage set for a crime, and I was about to walk in and play the lead role in my own tragedy. Before I opened the car door, I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. I took a deep breath and let my shoulders slump. I relaxed my facial muscles until my jaw hung slightly loose. I practiced a tremor in my right hand. I was no longer Harold the CEO, who terrified board members. I was Harold the confused old man who needed a caretaker. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The smell of bleach hit me instantly. It was sharp and chemical, barely masking the scent of stale cologne that I knew belonged to Tyler. They had been cleaning, erasing him. Linda was in the kitchen chopping fruit. When she saw me, she didn't smile. She dropped the knife. The clatter echoed loudly on the marble floor. Her eyes went wide, not with love, but with the panic of a child caught stealing from the cookie jar. "Harold," she stammered, wiping her hands on her apron. "You are back. I thought you were in Chicago until Monday. Why are you here so early?" I let my eyes wander around the room, unfocused. I blinked slowly, as if trying to process her words. "Chicago," I asked, my voice raspy and weak. I stared at her with a vacuous expression. "Linda, I didn't go to Chicago. I went to the grocery store." "Didn't I?" Linda walked over to me slowly, studying my face like a hawk looking for a mouse. "Harold," she said, her voice dropping to that patronizing tone one uses for toddlers. "You left for Chicago 2 days ago. Do you remember? You packed your suitcase. You kissed me goodbye. You have been gone for 48 hours. I furrowed my brow, feigning intense confusion. 2 days, I repeated, looking down at my hands. "But I am wearing the same clothes. I feel like I just left." She put a hand on my shoulder. Her touch was cold. "Oh, Harold," she sighed, shaking her head. "It is happening again. You are losing time. Dr. Stevenson warned us about this. You go into these fugue states and you forget whole days. Come sit down. You look exhausted." I allowed her to lead me to the armchair. Inside my chest, my heart was pounding with a mixture of rage and adrenaline. The gaslighting had begun. She was rewriting reality in real time, trying to make me doubt my own sanity. If I didn't have the camera footage on my phone proving I had been at the Marriott for 2 days, I might have actually believed her. She was that good. As I sat down, I noticed something on the Persian rug near the fireplace. A dark red stain. Merlot. I remembered watching Tyler spill his wine on the monitor the night before. I pointed a shaking finger at it. "Linda," I asked, "what happened to the rug? Who spilled wine?" Linda didn't even look at the stain. She looked at me with pity. "Harold, darling, you spilled that wine last week. Don't you remember? We had a fight about it. You got so angry you threw the glass." I stared at her. The lie was so bold, so effortless. Last week I had been in London for a consultation. I hadn't even been in the country. But the old Harold, the sharp Harold, would have pulled out his itinerary and proven her wrong. The new Harold just looked down at his feet, ashamed. "I did," I whispered. "I don't remember getting angry." She knelt beside me, taking my hand. "That is the problem, Harold. You get violent and then you forget. It is getting dangerous. For both of us." I felt a bile rise in my throat. She was planting the narrative of violence. If I ended up dead or locked away, she would tell everyone I had become aggressive. It was a masterclass in manipulation. I pulled my hand away, pretending to be overwhelmed. "I need some water," I said, standing up shakily. I walked to the kitchen counter and placed my leather wallet next to the fruit bowl. I made sure she saw me do it. I went to the sink and filled a glass of water, taking my time counting to 20. I heard the softest rustle of fabric behind me. When I turned back, the wallet was gone. I looked around the counter, moving the fruit bowl. Linda was watching me from the doorway, her arms crossed. "What are you looking for, Harold?" she asked. "My wallet," I said, patting my pockets. "I just put it here, right next to the apples." She laughed, a short, cruel sound. "Harold, your wallet is not there. You probably left it in the car. You always leave it in the car these days." "No," I insisted, letting my voice rise a little. "I put it right here. I know I did." She walked over and grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. "Stop it, Harold. Stop making things up. You are hallucinating again. Go check the car." I walked out to the car, playing along. I checked the passenger seat. Nothing. I came back inside. "It is not there, Linda." She sighed loudly, rolling her eyes. "Check the refrigerator." "The refrigerator?" I asked. "Why would my wallet be in the refrigerator?" "Because that is where you put the TV remote last Tuesday. Just check it." I opened the stainless steel door of the refrigerator. There, sitting next to the carton of milk, was my brown leather wallet. The cold air from the fridge hit my face, but it was nothing compared to the chill in my spine. She had moved it while my back was turned. It was a classic trick, simple but effective. It was designed to make me feel like my brain was firing blanks. I took the wallet out and held it up. My hands trembling for real this time, not from acting, but from the sheer effort of holding back my anger. "I found it," I whispered, looking at her with wide, fearful eyes. "I don't know how it got there." "I know," she said soothingly, taking the wallet from me. "It is okay. I will hold on to this for now. You can't be trusted with credit cards anymore. Not after you tried to buy that boat online yesterday." I hadn't tried to buy a boat. But I knew better than to argue. I just nodded, defeated. "I am tired, Linda. I think I need to lie down." She smiled. A predator's smile. "That is a good idea. Go upstairs. I will bring you your afternoon tea. And your medicine. You missed 3 doses while you were wandering around thinking you were in Chicago." I climbed the stairs, slowly gripping the banister, like an old man clinging to life. Every step was a battle. I wanted to turn around, run back down, and scream the truth in her face. I wanted to tell her I knew about Tyler. I knew about the safe. I knew about the plan to declare me incompetent. But I couldn't. Not yet. I needed them to get confident. I needed them to think I was broken. I went into the bedroom. The bed was made perfectly. The sheets were crisp. But I knew Tyler had been sweating in them 6 hours ago. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the clock on the nightstand. It read 2 p.m. I frowned. The sun outside the window looked lower. The light was golden like late afternoon. I checked my wristwatch. My watch said 5 p.m. She had changed the bedside clock. She was messing with my perception of time, disorienting me, making me question the most basic facts of existence. There was a knock on the door. Linda entered carrying a silver tray with a steaming cup of tea and 2 blue pills. "Here we go," she said cheerfully, placing the tray on the nightstand. "Drink up. It will help you sleep." I looked at the pills. They were not my blood pressure medication. They were slightly different. A different shade of blue. Probably the heavy sedatives Tyler had mentioned. "Thank you, Linda," I said meekly. I reached for the cup. My hand shook so badly that tea sloshed over the side onto the saucer. "Careful," she snapped, losing her patience for a split second before recovering. "Here, let me help you." She held the cup to my lips. I took a small sip, holding the liquid in my mouth. It tasted bitter, metallic. I swallowed a tiny amount and coughed, pretending to choke. "Water." I gasped, pointing to the bathroom. "I need water." She sighed, annoyed, and turned to walk into the ensuite bathroom to get a glass of tap water. In that 3-second window, I poured the tea into the soil of the potted ficus plant next to the bed and hid the pills under the mattress. When she turned back, I was wiping my mouth, looking dazed. "Did you drink it?" she asked, eyeing the empty cup. I nodded. "Yes, thank you." "Good. Now sleep. Don't come down for dinner. I have guests coming over. A support group for spouses of dementia patients. I don't want you to embarrass me." She walked out and closed the door. I heard the lock click from the outside. She had locked me in my own bedroom. I waited until her footsteps faded down the hall. Then I stood up. I walked to the mirror and stared at myself. The slump in my shoulders vanished. The vacuous look in my eyes disappeared, replacing it with a cold, steely glare. I was not a confused old man. I was a CEO who had crushed competitors far smarter than Linda and Tyler. They wanted a vegetable. I would give them a vegetable. But while they were busy celebrating their victory, I would be growing the roots of their destruction. I looked at the ficus plant where I had dumped the tea. Within a few hours, the leaves would start to curl and die from the poison. That was supposed to be me. I sat down in the armchair and looked directly into the eye of the teddy bear where the hidden camera was recording. I gave a small, barely perceptible nod. "I am still here," I whispered to the lens. "And I am coming for you." I sat at the head of the long mahogany dining table, the same table where I had celebrated Thanksgiving dinners and birthdays for 30 years, the same table where I had taught my son Brian how to cut his steak properly when he was 6 years old. Tonight the table felt like a courtroom, and I was the defendant on trial for the crime of being old and wealthy. Linda had set the table with the good china. The roast chicken smelled delicious, seasoned with rosemary and lemon, but to me it smelled like betrayal. I was waiting for Brian, my only son, my flesh and blood. Throughout the nightmare of the last 24 hours, a small, foolish part of me had held on to hope. I hoped that Brian didn't know. I hoped that Linda and her lover Tyler were manipulating him, keeping him in the dark. I hoped that when my son walked through that door, he would look at me and see his father, not a walking ATM machine. At 6:30 sharp, the front door opened. I heard Brian's heavy footsteps in the hall. He walked into the dining room. He looked terrible. He is 32 years old, but tonight he looked older. His face was pale and there were dark circles under his eyes. He was wearing a suit that was slightly too tight, a relic from the job I had got him at a brokerage firm 3 years ago. A job he had lost within 6 months due to what he called personality conflicts, but what I knew was sheer laziness. "Hi, Dad," Brian said. He didn't look at me. He looked at the wall just past my ear. He walked over and gave me a stiff, awkward hug. He smelled of stale cigarette smoke and nervous sweat. "Hello, son," I said, keeping my voice low and trembling slightly, maintaining the act. "It is good to see you. See, I feel like I haven't seen you in months." Brian pulled away and looked at Linda. They exchanged a glance, a quick, sharp look that communicated volumes. It was the look of conspirators checking if the plan was still in motion. "Dad, you saw me on Sunday," Brian said, pulling out his chair. "Don't you remember? We watched the football game together." I blinked, playing the part. "Sunday?" I asked. "But I was in Chicago on Sunday." "Wasn't I?" Brian sighed loudly, dramatically. He sat down and unfolded his napkin with aggressive movements. "No, Dad. You never went to Chicago. Linda told me you have been confused about this all day. It is getting worse, isn't it?" I looked down at my plate. My heart cracked a little. He was in on it. He wasn't a victim. He was a participant. I decided to push him to see how far he would go. "I don't feel confused, Brian," I said softly. "I feel tired. But I know who I am. I am your father. And I know this is my house." Linda poured wine into Brian's glass. She didn't offer me any. "Alcohol interferes with your new medication, Harold," she said sweetly. Brian took a large gulp of wine. He needed liquid courage to do what he was about to do. "Dad, we need to talk. About last night." "Last night?" I asked. "I was sleeping." Brian put his glass down hard. "No, Dad. You weren't sleeping. You called me. 3 times. I stared at him. The lie was so specific, so blatant. I had not called him. My phone had been in my pocket the entire time I was at the hotel watching the security feed. "I called you," I asked, feigning innocence. "What did I say?" Brian leaned forward. His hands were shaking. "You were rambling, Dad. You were screaming about snakes in the walls. You said there were men coming to steal your teeth. You were crying, Dad. It was terrifying. I almost called 911, but Linda said she had it under control." I looked at my son. I remembered holding him when he had a fever as a toddler. I remembered paying for his first car. I remembered bailing him out of debt when his restaurant business failed. I had always been his safety net. And now he was weaving a net to trap me. Snakes in the walls, men stealing my teeth. He was painting a picture of severe psychosis. He was building the case for a judge. I don't remember that," I stammered, letting my hand shake as I reached for my water. "That doesn't sound like me." "It is you now," Harold, Linda interjected, cutting her chicken with surgical precision. "This is the new reality, and we can't ignore it anymore. Brian and I have been talking. We are worried about your finances. Here it comes, the pivot from health to money. It is always about the money." Brian reached into his briefcase, which he had placed by his feet. He pulled out a thick document bound in a blue folder. It looked identical to the one I had seen Tyler holding in the safe. "Dad," Brian said, his voice cracking slightly. "You made some bad transfers yesterday. You tried to send $50,000 to a Nigerian prince email scam. The bank flagged it." I clenched my jaw so hard my teeth hurt. I had done no such thing. They were inventing financial incompetence to go along with the mental decline. "I did not," I said, allowing a flash of old anger to seep through before tamping it down. "I know how to spot a scam, Brian. I built a company worth millions." You did, Dad. In the past, Brian said, pushing the folder across the table toward me. But right now, you are vulnerable. Linda and I, we just want to protect you. We want to make sure no one takes advantage of you. I looked at the folder. The title page read, Irrevocable Living Trust Amendment and Transfer of Trusteeship. It wasn't just a power of attorney. It was a complete handover. If I signed this, Brian and Linda would become the sole trustees of my entire estate. They would control every dime. I would have to ask them for permission to buy a pack of gum. What is this? I asked, touching the paper as if it were hot. It is just a safety measure, Brian said quickly. It gives me and Linda temporary control to manage the investments while you get better. Once you are well again, we transfer it back. I promise. Temporary. The most dangerous word in the English language. Nothing is as permanent as a temporary government program or a temporary transfer of power to a greedy relative. I need to read it, I said, reaching for my reading glasses. Linda reached out and gently took the glasses from my hand. Oh, Harold, don't strain your eyes. It is standard legal jargon. We already had your lawyer review it. My lawyer, Leonard. I knew for a fact Leonard had not seen this. If Leonard had seen this, he would have set fire to it. Brian picked up a pen. A Mont Blanc pen I had given him for his graduation. He clicked it open. Just sign it, Dad. Please. For me. So I don't have to worry about you waking up and losing everything. I looked at Brian's face. He was sweating. Beads of perspiration were forming on his upper lip. He looked terrified. Not terrified for me. Terrified of something else. Why are you rushing me, Brian? I asked. Is there something wrong? No, he snapped too loud. Nothing is wrong. Why do you always have to make everything difficult? Just sign the damn paper. The outburst hung in the air. The mask of the concerned son had slipped, revealing the desperate debtor underneath. I looked down at the table. My hand brushed against my napkin, and I deliberately knocked my fork onto the floor. It clattered loudly. I am sorry, I mumbled, ducking my head. I am so clumsy. I bent down to pick up the fork. Under the table, I saw Brian's leg bouncing nervously. But I saw something else. His phone was sitting on his thigh, face up. The screen lit up with a notification. It was a text message. The font was large enough for me to read in the dim light. It was from a contact saved as T-Rex. I knew that had to be Tyler. The message read, "Did the old bag sign it yet? We are running out of time. The Sharks want their money by midnight." I sat back up slowly, placing the fork on the table. The Sharks. Loan sharks. So that was it. Brian wasn't just greedy. He was in deep. He had gambled again, or made another bad investment, and now he owed money to dangerous people. He was selling his father to save his own skin. The realization hit me harder than any physical blow. My son was not just a disappointment. He was a traitor. He was willing to declare me insane, willing to strip me of my dignity, willing to lock me away in a facility just to pay off a gambling debt. I felt a coldness settle in my chest. It was the death of affection, the death of fatherhood. In that moment, Brian ceased to be my son. He became a liability, a hostile entity. I can't sign this tonight, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. What do you mean you can't sign it? Linda hissed, dropping her fork. I mean... My hand, I said, holding it up. I made it shake violently. I can't hold the pen. Look at me. I am having a spell. I need to lie down. Brian stood up, knocking his chair over. Dad, stop acting. Just grab the pen and make an X. It doesn't have to be perfect. I stood up, leaning heavily on the table. I feel dizzy. I think I need to go to the bathroom. I shuffled toward the door. Brian moved to block me. He looked ready to grab me physically to force the pen into my hand. His eyes were wild. "Let him go, Brian," Linda said, her voice sharp. "If he signs it while he is having a spell, the notary might question it. We will do it in the morning, when he is lucid." Brian looked at Linda, then at me. He looked like he wanted to scream, but he stepped aside. "Fine," he spat. "Morning." But first thing in the morning, Dad. No excuses. I walked past him. I could smell his fear. It smelled sour. I went into the powder room and locked the door. I turned on the faucet to mask any sound. I looked at myself in the mirror. I did not see a victim. I saw a man who had just been given the final piece of the puzzle. They were desperate. Brian had a deadline of midnight. That meant tonight they would be frantic. Tonight they would make mistakes. I pulled my phone from my pocket. I had a text from Leonard. "Documents ready. The trap is set." I looked at the door. Beyond it, my wife and son were likely arguing, probably panicking about the deadline. They thought they were waiting for morning to claim their prize. They didn't know that morning would bring their judgment day. I turned off the water. I unlocked the door. I shuffled back out into the hallway. "I am going to bed," I called out weakly. "Good night, Brian. I hope you sleep well." I knew he wouldn't. And for the first time in my life, I didn't care. I walked up the stairs, listening to their whispered arguments fading below me. The dinner with my son was over. The war had officially begun. Friday morning brought a cold, gray rain that lashed against the windows of the estate. It was the kind of weather that made the house feel like a mausoleum. I sat in my study ostensibly reading a biography of Churchill, but in reality I was watching the live feed from the kitchen on my tablet, which was hidden inside the hollowed-out pages of the book. Linda was at the granite island. She was not making coffee. She was acting like a chemist in a dark laboratory. On the counter sat a small marble mortar and pestle, the one we usually used for crushing spices for curry. Today, however, she was not crushing cumin or coriander. She was crushing pills. I zoomed in on the screen. Beside her lay 3 empty blister packs. The pills were small and blue. I recognized them immediately. They were the heavy sedatives Tyler had procured, the kind used to tranquilize patients in psychiatric wards to keep them docile and confused. She ground them down with a rhythmic motion of her wrist. Grind, grind, grind. Her face was a mask of concentration. There was no hesitation, no guilt. Just the efficient movements of a woman trying to dissolve her husband. She swept the fine blue powder into a bowl of steaming tomato bisque. The red soup masked the color perfectly. She stirred it slowly, watching the powder disappear. It was a metaphor for our marriage. She was stirring poison into the warmth I had provided her. I closed the book and sat back. My heart was hammering a rhythm of rage against my ribs. This was no longer just fraud. This was no longer just theft. This was attempted murder. They were not just trying to make me sign papers. They were trying to write my brain chemistry. If I ingested that amount of sedative combined with my heart medication, it could stop my heart. Or at the very least, it would leave me in a vegetative state from which I might never recover. There was a knock on the door. I quickly slid the tablet into my desk drawer and locked it. "Come in!" I called out, making my voice sound weak and tremulous. Linda entered carrying a silver tray. She was wearing a soft yellow cardigan, trying to look like the comforting nurse. "I brought you lunch, Harold," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You didn't eat much at breakfast. You need to keep your strength up." She placed the tray on the desk. The tomato soup smelled rich and savory. Beside it sat a grilled cheese sandwich and a glass of water. It looked like the comfort food of my childhood. It looked like love. But I knew it was death. "Thank you, Linda," I said, looking at the soup. "I am not very hungry. My stomach feels unsettled." "You have to eat something," she insisted, pushing the bowl closer. Just try the soup. It is warm. It will help you relax. Help me relax. That was an understatement. It would help me stop breathing. I picked up the spoon. My hand trembled. I dipped it into the red liquid and raised it to my lips. Linda watched me. She stopped breathing. She was leaning forward slightly, waiting for the swallow, waiting for the poison to enter my system. I stopped the spoon just inches from my mouth. I frowned. "Linda," I said, looking past her toward the hallway. "Did you hear that?" "Hear what?" she asked, annoyed. "The front door," I said. "I think someone knocked. Maybe it is the courier with the documents Brian wanted." "No one knocked, Harold," she said. "Just eat." "Please check," I insisted, putting the spoon down. "I am sure I heard it. You know how anxious I get about deliveries." She sighed loudly, rolling her eyes at my senility. "Fine. I will check, but eat while I am gone." She turned and walked out of the room. Her heels clicked on the hardwood floor. I waited until she turned the corner toward the foyer. I moved with the speed of a man half my age. I grabbed the bowl of soup. Beside my heavy oak desk stood a large potted ficus tree. It was an expensive plant, almost 6 feet tall, sitting in a decorative ceramic pot. I poured the entire contents of the soup bowl into the soil. The red liquid soaked into the dark earth instantly. I put the bowl back on the tray. I grabbed a tissue and wiped the rim to make it look used. Then I took the spoon and smeared a little residue on my lips. When Linda returned 30 seconds later, I was wiping my mouth, looking satisfied. There was no one at the door. "Harold," she said sharply, "you are hearing things again." I smiled sheepishly. "I am sorry. My ears are playing tricks on me. But the soup was delicious." "Thank you." She looked at the empty bowl. A flash of triumph crossed her face. It was ugly to witness. "Good," she said, picking up the tray. "I am glad you liked it. You should rest now. The medicine needs time to work." She left the room humming a tune. She thought she had won. She thought the chemical lobotomy had begun. I waited 10 minutes, then locked the study door. I went to the small bar fridge I kept in the corner and grabbed a protein bar. I ate it quickly, realizing I was starving. I couldn't eat anything she prepared anymore. I would have to survive on packaged snacks and water from the bathroom tap until this was over. That afternoon, while Linda was in the shower, I made my move on the medicine cabinet. I had prepared for this. Earlier in the week, when I first suspected the gaslighting, I had gone to a pharmacy 2 towns over. I had bought a bottle of high-potency vitamin B12 and a bottle of niacin. The pills were almost identical in size and shape to my heart medication and the sedatives she was swapping in. I went into the master bathroom. I found the hidden stash of pills behind her makeup case. I took the blue sedatives out of the prescription bottle labeled for me and replaced them with the harmless vitamins. I did the same with my heart medication, which she had replaced with sugar pills. I put my real heart medication in a hollowed-out flashlight in my nightstand. From this moment on, every time she forced a pill down my throat, thinking she was weakening me, she would actually be giving me a vitamin boost. I almost laughed at the irony. They were trying to kill me, but they were going to make me the healthiest man in the county. But for the plan to work, I had to sell the effects. I had to become the madman they wanted to see. That evening, I came down to the living room. Tyler was there. He had stopped hiding. He was sitting on my sofa, drinking my scotch, acting like the lord of the manor. When I walked in, he didn't even stand up. "Hey, Pops," he said, smirking. "How is the head?" "Feeling a little woozy." I stood in the middle of the room and stared at the wallpaper. It was a damask pattern, intricate swirls of gold and burgundy. I widened my eyes. I started to breathe shallowly. "The spiders," I whispered, pointing at the wall. Linda looked up from her magazine. "What are you talking about, Harold?" "The spiders," I shouted, backing away in mock terror. "Can't you see them? They are crawling out of the flowers. Thousands of them. They are on the ceiling. Get them off. Get them off me. I began to slap at my arms and chest, fighting off invisible insects. I scratched at my neck until the skin turned red. I fell to my knees, hyperventilating. Linda and Tyler exchanged a look. It wasn't fear. It was delight. "Wow," Tyler muttered. "That dose really kicked in hard. He is tripping balls." Linda walked over to me, but she didn't help me up. She stood over me, watching me writhe on the floor. "It is okay, Harold," she said, her voice devoid of comfort. "Just close your eyes. It is all in your head." "No, they are biting me," I screamed, curling into a fetal position. "Make it stop. Please make it stop." Tyler laughed. He actually laughed. "Hey, Linda, get the camera. We should record this. Proof for the doctor that he is a danger to himself." They recorded me for 5 minutes. I cried. I begged. I spoke to people who weren't there. I called out for my dead mother. It was the greatest performance of my life. And it broke my heart, because I realized that if this were real, if I were truly suffering, they would not be helping me. They would be filming me. Finally, they grew bored. They helped me up and led me to my room like a prisoner. "Lock the door," Tyler said. "We don't want him wandering around at night." They locked me in. I lay on the bed in the dark, listening to them laugh downstairs. I stopped crying immediately. I lay there staring at the ceiling, calculating. The next morning, I woke up early. I unlocked the door with the spare key I had taped under the mattress and crept down to the study. I went straight to the ficus tree. The reaction had been faster than I expected. The lush green leaves had turned a sickly yellow. The tips were brown and curled. The plant was drooping, dying from the toxic chemical soup I had poured into it yesterday. I took a photo of the dying plant with my phone. This was evidence, physical proof of the toxicity of the substance they had fed me. If that soup could kill a 6-foot tree overnight, imagine what it would have done to my kidneys, my liver, my brain. I looked at the dead plant and felt a cold kinship with it. It had taken the bullet for me. I heard footsteps upstairs. The vultures were waking up. I quickly retreated to the kitchen, grabbed an apple, and sat at the table staring blankly at the wall, waiting for them to find me. Today was the day. Today I would sign the papers. Today I would give them exactly what they wanted, so that tomorrow I could take everything they had. It was 2 a.m. on Saturday when the email finally arrived. The house was quiet in that heavy, suffocating way that only happens when there are 3 people under one roof who are all lying to each other. I was locked in my study, pretending to be asleep in the leather armchair, my reading glasses askew on my nose just in case Linda unlocked the door to check on me. But I was wide awake. The tablet in my lap glowed with the blue light of the encrypted message I had been waiting for. It was from the private investigator agency Russo had recommended. The subject line was simple: "The Red Mustang." I took a deep breath. I knew whatever was inside this file would change everything. I tapped the screen and the file opened. The first thing I saw was a mugshot. It was him. The man sleeping in my guest room. The man who had been eating my food, drinking my scotch, and trying to poison my soup. But the name under the photo was not Tyler. The name printed in bold block letters was Gary Slavens. I scrolled down, reading the summary with the cold detachment of a CEO reviewing a hostile takeover bid. Gary Slavens was 34 years old, not 28 as he had told Linda. He was born in Trenton, New Jersey. His criminal record was longer than the grocery list Linda made every week. Grand larceny, identity theft, fraud, and 2 counts of elder abuse in the state of Florida. I paused at the term elder abuse. A chill went down my spine that had nothing to do with the drafty window. This was not his first rodeo. This was his profession. I read the detailed case notes from Florida. 5 years ago, Gary had romanced a 70-year-old widow named Beatrice in Sarasota. He had met her at a grief support group. He claimed to be a financial advisor. Within 6 months, he had moved in. Within 8 months, he had isolated her from her children, claiming they were only after her money. Within a year, Beatrice was in a state-run nursing home destitute and confused, while Gary disappeared with her life savings and her vintage Mercedes. I looked at the photo of Gary again. In the mugshot, he looked smug. He had the eyes of a shark. Dead. Black. Hungry. He didn't see women like Beatrice or Linda as human beings. He saw them as bank vaults that just needed the right combination of compliments and fear to crack open. But the report got worse. The investigator had dug into his current financials. It turned out Gary was not investing in cryptocurrency as he had told Linda. He was gambling. High-stakes underground poker games in Atlantic City and backroom parlors in Queens. And he was bad at it. Very bad. According to the report, Gary owed a staggering sum to a syndicate based in New York. $500,000. $500,000. The debt had been accruing interest at a rate that would make a loan shark blush. And here was the kicker. The deadline for payment was next Tuesday. I sat back in my chair and let that information sink in. Next Tuesday. That was 3 days away. Everything suddenly clicked into place. The urgency, the pressure on Linda, the desperate attempt to drug me into submission. They weren't just greedy. They were terrified. Gary was a dead man walking. If he didn't come up with $500,000 in 72 hours, the people he owed money to would not send a collection agency. They would send a cleaner. This explained why they couldn't wait for the slow process of a natural decline. They needed me incompetent now. They needed the power of attorney now. They needed to sell the house to a cash buyer immediately to pay off his debt. I looked at the transcript of text messages the investigator had intercepted. Seeing my wife's name on the screen made my stomach turn, but I forced myself to read. Message from Gary to Linda sent yesterday at noon. Did the old fossil drink the soup yet? We are running out of time, babe. My investors are getting impatient. Message from Linda to Gary. He ate it. He is acting crazy seeing spiders. I think it is working. Just promise me we will go to Italy when this is over. Just you and me. Message from Gary to Linda. Of course, babe. Italy. Paris. Wherever you want. Just get the signature. And then I saw a message Gary had sent to a number labeled Vinny, likely the bookie or the enforcer. Message from Gary to Vinny. Relax. I have a whale on the hook. $5 million in real estate. The wife is eating out of my hand. I will have your cash by Wednesday morning. Just don't send the boys to the house. I put the tablet down. My hands were shaking, but this time it was not from fear or acting. It was pure, unadulterated rage. He was using my wife. He was mocking her. He was calling me a whale. And he was bringing the threat of violent mobsters to my front door. But amidst the rage, I saw the opportunity. Desperation is a cologne you can smell from across the room, and Gary reeked of it. A desperate man makes mistakes. A desperate man takes shortcuts. And a desperate man is easily manipulated if you know what he is afraid of. Gary wasn't afraid of the police. He had been to prison before. He was afraid of Vinny. He was afraid of a broken kneecap or a bullet in the head. That fear was my leverage. I looked at the clock. It was almost 3 a.m. I had 3 days. 3 days to turn their panic against them. I needed to make them believe that they were winning. I needed to make them believe that the house sale was a done deal. I needed to lead them right to the edge of the cliff and then step aside and let gravity do the rest. I opened a new email window and began to type a message to Leonard, my lawyer. Leonard, the situation has escalated. The hostile party is leveraged by organized crime debt. Deadline is Tuesday. We move the timeline up. Prepare the fake buyer for the house. We are going to give them exactly what they want. A cash offer, immediate closing. Let them think they have won the lottery. I want everyone in the same room on Monday morning. The wife, the son, and the con artist. Bring the police, but tell them to wait for my signal. I hit send. I sat in the dark listening to the silence of the house. Upstairs, my wife was sleeping next to a predator, thinking she was finding love. She didn't know that she was just collateral damage in a gambler's last stand. I felt a strange pang of pity for her. Not love. That was gone. But pity. She had thrown away a life of comfort and respect for a man who would have sold her to a human trafficker if it would have cleared his debt. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the dark driveway. I imagined the red Mustang parked down the street. I imagined Gary sleeping with one eye open, terrified of every shadow. You want to play games, Gary? I whispered to the glass. You want to hunt whales? Well, you just harpooned the wrong creature. You didn't catch a whale, son. You caught a kraken. And on Monday morning, I am going to pull you down into the deep. I went back to the desk and deleted the email from the investigator, wiping the trash folder. I put the tablet back in its hiding place. I unlocked the study door and shuffled back to my bedroom. I climbed into the guest bed where I had been exiled. I pulled the covers up to my chin. I needed to rest. Tomorrow I had a big performance. I had to be the most confused, compliant, terrified old man in the world. I had to convince them that the victory was theirs so that when the trap snapped shut, the sound would be deafening. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in a week, I slept soundly. I knew who my enemy was. I knew his name. I knew his weakness. And I knew exactly how to destroy him. Sunday night was the eye of the storm. The house was quiet in a way that felt heavy and pressurized, like the air before a tornado touches down. Linda and Tyler were asleep in the guest room, exhausted from their day of plotting and prematurely celebrating their victory. They had spent the evening drinking my vintage champagne, toasting to their future in Italy. They thought I was locked in my room, a drugged and confused old man staring at the wall. They were wrong. At 3 a.m, I slipped out of bed. I did not move like an invalid. I moved with the precision of the man who had built a logistics empire. I dressed in the dark, putting on a dark raincoat and a baseball cap. I didn't take my keys. I took the spare set I kept hidden inside the hollowed-out spine of a dictionary in the library. I bypassed the alarm system using the master code, the same code Linda thought I had forgotten months ago. I slipped out the side door into the rain. The cold air felt like freedom. I walked 2 blocks down the street to where I had parked my car the previous afternoon, pretending I had forgotten where I left it. It was a small act of calculated senility that now gave me a getaway vehicle they wouldn't notice was missing from the driveway. I drove to a 24-hour diner on the outskirts of town, the kind of place with flickering neon signs and coffee that tastes like battery acid. It was the last place anyone would look for Harold the multimillionaire. Leonard was already there, sitting in a booth in the back. He looked out of place in his tailored Italian suit amidst the cracked vinyl seats. Leonard has been my lawyer for 30 years. He is the only man in the world I trust. When he saw me, he didn't wave. He just nodded grimly. "You look like hell, Harold," he said, as I slid into the booth opposite him. "I feel like hell, Leonard," I replied. "But I am lucid. More lucid than I have been in years." "Did you bring the papers?" Leonard reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick stack of documents. He placed them on the table between us. "I have drafted everything exactly as you asked in your email," he said, his voice low. "But I have to ask you one last time, Harold. Are you sure about this? This is the nuclear option. Once we sign this, there is no going back. You are effectively disinheriting everyone. Your wife, your son, everyone." I looked at the papers. The top document was titled, "The Harold Vance Revocable Living Trust Amendment." "I am sure," I said. My son is not a victim, Leonard. He is an accomplice. He is trying to sell me to a loan shark to cover his gambling debts. And my wife. Well, let us just say she has made her choice. Leonard sighed and uncapped a pen. All right, let us review the trap. He flipped the document open to page 5. This is the poison pill clause, he explained, pointing to a paragraph of dense legal text. Right now, you are the sole trustee of your estate. Usually, if you are declared incompetent, the successor trustee takes over. In your current will, that is Linda and Brian. I nodded. That is what they are counting on. That is why they are drugging me. They want that doctor to sign the paper declaring me unfit so they can step in and liquidate the assets. Exactly, Leonard said, a shark-like grin spreading across his face. But this amendment changes the succession rule. We are inserting a specific condition based on the suspicion of coercion. The clause states that in the event of a medical declaration of incompetency or a sudden transfer of power of attorney, all assets in the trust are immediately frozen. Frozen, I asked, taking a sip of the terrible coffee. Frozen, Leonard confirmed. But here is the beautiful part. The amendment dictates that if such an event occurs, control of the trust does not pass to family members. Instead, it triggers an automatic transfer of the entire liquid corpus of the trust into a restricted donor-advised fund. The beneficiary of that fund is the National Veterans Foundation. I smiled. It was perfect. I had served in the Navy before I started my business. It felt right. So let me get this straight, I said, leaning in. If they drag me to a doctor on Monday and get him to say I am crazy, or if they force me to sign that power of attorney, the moment they try to access the bank accounts, the money vanishes. Leonard finished. The accounts will be locked. The bank will receive an automatic notification of the trust trigger. Linda and Brian won't be able to withdraw a dime. They won't be able to sell the house. They won't even be able to pay the electric bill. The estate effectively bypasses them and goes to charity. They will be guardians of a pauper. And the house, I asked. The house is titled to the trust, Leonard said. If they try to sell it, the title company will see the restriction. The proceeds of any sale would go directly to the Veterans Fund. They get nothing. Zero. It was a masterpiece of legal engineering. It used their own weapon against them. The harder they tried to prove I was crazy, the faster they would lose the money they were trying to steal. But we have a problem, Leonard said, his expression turning serious again. The timing. The loan shark deadline is Tuesday. They are desperate. If they find out about this trust, they might get violent. They might try to force you to sign a revocation. Or worse. They won't find out, I said. Not until it is too late. That is why we need the second part of the plan. The fake buyer. Leonard nodded. I made the call. I found a guy. His name is Saul. He is a disbarred real estate attorney who did some time for fraud. He is looking to make a quick buck. He looks the part. Flashy suit, loud watch. He will play the cash buyer perfectly. Good, I said. I want him at the house on Monday morning at 10 a.m. Tell him to be aggressive. Tell him to offer $5.2 million. Cash. Closing in 24 hours. Leonard raised an eyebrow. That is a dream offer. It is too good to be true. That is the point, I said. Gary is desperate. He needs a miracle. When a drowning man sees a life raft, he doesn't check for holes. He just grabs it. If we offer him a quick exit, he will take the bait. He will be so focused on the money that he won't notice the police cars waiting down the street. I took the pen from Leonard. My hand did not shake. I signed my name at the bottom of the amendment. Harold Vance. The signature was strong and bold. I handed the papers back to Leonard. File these immediately when the courthouse opens on Monday, I said. Make sure the timestamp is recorded. I want this to be ironclad. Leonard put the papers back in his briefcase. Consider it done. Be careful, Harold. You are going back into a snake pit. I stood up, buttoning my raincoat. I am not afraid of snakes, Leonard. I used to eat snakes for breakfast in the boardroom. I drove back to the house in the rain. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I parked the car down the street and walked the rest of the way, slipping back through the side door. I crept upstairs. The house was still silent. I went into the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. I looked at my reflection. The eyes staring back were tired, but they were clear. I went back to the guest room and lay down. I needed to sleep for a few hours. I needed to recharge. Because tomorrow the curtain would rise on the final act. Tomorrow I would introduce Gary and Linda to the buyer of their dreams, and I would watch with a smile as they signed their own arrest warrants. The trap was set. The bait was hooked. All I had to do now was wait for the sharks to bite. The storm outside had passed, leaving behind a silence so deep it felt heavy. I was lying in the guest room bed. My breathing was slow and rhythmic, the result of 40 years of practicing meditation in boardrooms before hostile takeovers. To the naked eye, I was asleep, a tired old man lost in dreams. But under the duvet, my hands were clenched into fists so tight, my fingernails were digging into my palms. I was not sleeping. I was waiting. It was 3 a.m., the witching hour. I heard the floorboard in the hallway creak. It was the third board from the top of the stairs, the one that always announced visitors. I didn't move. I didn't change the cadence of my breath. I kept my eyes closed, trusting my other senses, which seemed to have sharpened in the darkness. The door handle turned slowly. It was a faint metallic click. The door drifted open. I smelled him before I heard him. Stale cigarette smoke, cheap cologne, and the metallic tang of fear sweat. Tyler, or rather Gary, the man who owed $500,000 to the mob and had 3 days to pay it. He moved into the room. His footsteps were soft but clumsy. He was not a professional assassin. He was a desperate thug. I felt his presence standing over the bed. The air shifted as he leaned over me. I could hear his breathing. It was ragged, fast, and shallow. He was working himself up to do something terrible. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to open my eyes, to sit up, to grab the heavy brass lamp on the nightstand and swing it at his head. But I knew I couldn't. If I woke up now, the charade would end. And if the charade ended, he might just beat me to death in a panic. My only armor was my frailty. My only shield was the lie that I was already half gone. I felt the mattress dip as he kneeled on the edge of the bed. Then I felt the air displace above my face. He had picked up the spare pillow. Please, no, I thought. Not this way. Not like a dog. The pillow came down. It wasn't gentle. It was sudden and violent. The heavy down pillow slammed into my face, pressing my head into the mattress. The world went black instantly. The soft fabric mashed against my nose and mouth, sealing off the air. My eyes flew open in the darkness, staring into the suffocating cotton. My lungs seized. The panic was immediate and primal. My body wanted to thrash. My legs wanted to kick. My hands wanted to reach up and claw at his face. I forced myself to stay limp. It was the hardest thing I have ever done. I had to play dead while I was dying. If I fought, he would only press harder. He would use his weight. He would break my neck. I had to gamble everything on the fact that he was an amateur. 1 second. My chest burned. 2 seconds. Bright spots danced in my vision. 3 seconds. The pressure on my face was immense. I could feel his hands pressing down on either side of my head. He was grunting with effort. Just as my lungs were about to spasm, just as I was about to lose the battle and fight back, a voice cut through the darkness. It was a hiss, sharp and angry. Gary, stop it! The pressure didn't lift. Get off him, you idiot, Linda hissed louder. The pillow lifted. I lay there gasping silently, forcing myself not to suck in air in huge gulps. I kept my eyes closed even though my vision was swimming. I let my mouth hang open like a corpse. What the hell are you doing? Linda whispered furiously. I heard her shove him. He stumbled back from the bed. I am finishing it, Gary panted. His voice was wild, trembling. Look at him, Linda. He is useless. He is barely human anymore. Why wait? I can end it now. We call the doctor in the morning. We say he stopped breathing in his sleep. Old men die in their sleep all the time. It is natural. No, Linda snapped. It is not natural. Not with the amount of sedatives in his blood. If the coroner does an autopsy and finds the levels you mixed yesterday, they will know it wasn't natural. They will call it an overdose. They will investigate. Let them investigate, Gary growled. By the time they figure it out, we will be in Brazil. You are stupid, Gary, Linda said, her voice dropping to a terrified whisper. You are so stupid. If he dies tonight, the assets freeze. It goes to probate. Do you know how long probate takes? Months, sometimes years. Do you have years, Gary? Do you have months before Vinny comes for your kneecaps? The room went silent. I could hear Gary breathing hard, trying to process the logic through his panic. We need the signature. Linda continued, her voice softer now, persuasive. We need him alive on Monday morning. We need him to sign the deed of sale for the house to the cash buyer. And we need him to sign the wire transfer. Once the money is in our offshore account, then he can die. Gary paced the room. I could hear his shoes scuffing the carpet. Monday, he muttered. That is tomorrow. Yes, Linda said. Tomorrow morning. The buyer comes at 10. We get the check. We deposit it. Then tomorrow night we give him the final cocktail. The insulin overdose. It mimics a heart attack. No autopsy unless they are looking for it. Clean. Simple. And we are rich. I lay there motionless, listening to my wife plan my murder with the practicality of someone planning a grocery run. Insulin. That was the new plan. A quiet heart attack after the money was safe. Gary let out a long, shuddering breath. Fine. Fine. We wait 24 hours. But looking at him breathing, it makes me sick. He is just a sack of meat holding my money. Let's go, Linda said. Come back to bed. He is out cold. He won't remember anything. Even if he wakes up, he will think it was a nightmare. The drugs have fried his brain. I heard them move toward the door. Gary paused one last time. I could feel his eyes on me. Enjoy your last night, old man, he whispered. The door clicked shut. I didn't move for 10 minutes. I lay there in the dark, tears leaking from my eyes, running down into my ears. Not tears of sadness. Tears of pure physical reaction to the adrenaline crash. My body shook violently. I gasped for air, greedily filling my burning lungs. I touched my face. My nose felt bruised. My lips were numb. He had really tried to do it. If Linda hadn't walked in at that exact second, I would be dead. I sat up slowly, swinging my legs over the edge of the bed. My hands were trembling so hard, I had to grip the mattress to steady myself. They were going to kill me. It wasn't a possibility anymore. It wasn't a vague threat. It was a scheduled event. Monday night. After the sale. I looked at the clock. It was 3:15 a.m. The fear began to recede, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. They thought I was a sack of meat. They thought I was fried. They thought I was helpless. I stood up and walked to the window. The rain had stopped. The moon was breaking through the clouds. You gave me 24 hours, I whispered to the empty room. That was your mistake. You should have finished it, Gary. Because you just gave the shark back his teeth. I went into the bathroom and splashed water on my face, washing away the sweat of terror. I looked at myself in the mirror. I looked older. The fear had aged me, but there was fire in my eyes. I went back to bed, but I didn't sleep. I lay there rehearsing every line I would say tomorrow. I visualized every movement. I planned the exact moment I would drop the mask. They wanted a show. I would give them a show. I would play the part of the dying king one last time, and then I would show them what a king does to traitors. Monday morning was coming, and I was ready for war. Monday morning arrived with a deceptive brightness. The sun streamed through the bay windows of the living room, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. To an outsider, it looked like a celebration. There were fresh flowers on the coffee table. A platter of expensive pastries sat untouched on the sideboard. Linda had even put on classical music. Vivaldi, The Four Seasons. It was the soundtrack of my life. I had listened to it while closing deals in Tokyo and London. Now it was the soundtrack to my own orchestrated demise. I stood at the top of the stairs, gripping the banister. My hand was steady, but before I took the first step, I deliberately relaxed my muscles. I let my shoulders slump. I allowed my mouth to hang slightly open. I clouded my eyes, pushing away the sharpness of the predator and pulling on the mask of the prey. Today I was not Harold the CEO. Today I was Harold the confused geriatric, the burden, the obstacle that needed to be removed. I shuffled down the stairs. My slippers scuffed against the wood. Linda was waiting at the bottom. She was wearing a white dress. It was too cheerful, too bright. She looked like a nurse in a psychiatric ward from a 1950s movie. "Good morning, darling," she cooed, reaching out to take my arm. Her grip was firm. Too firm. It was not a caress, it was a restraint. "Look who is here to visit. We are having a little party." She led me into the living room. The cast of characters was assembled. First there was Brian sitting on the edge of the sofa, nervously tapping his foot. He looked nauseous. He couldn't meet my eyes. He was staring at this carpet, probably calculating how much of my money would be left after he paid off his gambling debts. Then there was Tyler, or Cousin Oliver, as he was being introduced today. He was wearing a suit that didn't fit him properly. The jacket was too tight across the shoulders, straining against his gym muscles. He had combed his hair back and put on wire-rimmed glasses, trying to look intellectual. He looked like a wolf trying to wear a sheep costume that was 3 sizes too small. And finally, there was the notary, a man Linda introduced as Mr. Sykes. He was a small, sweaty man with a comb-over and a briefcase that looked like it had seen better days. I knew his type immediately. He was not a reputable official. He was a stamp for hire. The kind of notary you find in the back of a strip mall who doesn't ask questions as long as the cash envelope is thick enough. "Harold, look," Linda said, guiding me to the armchair. "Cousin Oliver came all the way from Ohio to see you. Isn't that nice?" I squinted at Tyler. I leaned forward, invading his personal space. I smelled the fear on him. It smelled like cheap mints and old sweat. "Oliver," I asked, my voice cracking perfectly. "We don't have a cousin Oliver. My sister didn't have any children. She died in 74. Tyler cleared his throat. He looked at Linda for help. "I am from the other side, Uncle Harold," he said, his voice tight. "Aunt Margaret's side." "Margaret," I repeated, looking confused. "Margaret hated Ohio. She said it smelled like corn and sadness. Why would you live there?" Mr. Sykes, the notary, looked at his watch. He tapped the face of it impatiently. "Mrs. Vance, we are on a tight schedule. I have another appointment at 11. Linda squeezed my shoulder hard. Her nails dug into my flesh through my cardigan. "Harold, stop rambling. Oliver is here to help us with some paperwork. Remember we talked about this? The nice man wants to buy the house. And Oliver is going to help manage the money, so you don't have to worry about bills anymore." She pushed me down into the chair. The table in front of me was covered in documents. I recognized them immediately. The power of attorney, the deed of sale, the revocation of previous wills. It was the trifecta of betrayal. Brian stood up and walked over. He picked up a pen. A Mont Blanc. My Mont Blanc. The one I had used to sign the merger with Logistics International 10 years ago. Seeing it in his sweating hand made my blood boil. "Just sign here, Dad," Brian said, thrusting the pen at me, right next to the blue flag. I looked at the paper. The letters swam before my eyes, not because I couldn't see, but because I refused to focus. I looked up at the ceiling. "It is cold in here," I complained, wrapping my arms around myself. "Why is it so cold, Linda? Did you turn off the heat to save money?" "We have money, you know. I worked very hard for it." "It is 72 degrees, Harold," Linda hissed through her teeth. "Just sign the paper. I want my sweater," I said, pouting like a child. "The blue one. The one with the buttons." Tyler slammed his hand down on the armrest of the sofa. "Just sign the damn paper, old man." The room went silent. The mask of the polite nephew had slipped. Tyler realized his mistake immediately. He forced a smile that looked more like a grimace. "I mean, Uncle Harold? Please. We just want to get this done so we can have cake." Linda bought cake. "Don't you want cake?" I looked at him with wide, fearful eyes. I shrank back into the chair. "Why are you yelling, Oliver? You look like the man from my dreams, the one with the pillow." Linda gasped. She shot a look at Tyler that could have peeled paint off the walls. She knew exactly what I was talking about. Tyler turned pale. "He is just having a nightmare," Linda said quickly, her voice rising in pitch. "He gets confused. Harold, look at me. Look at the paper. Sign your name. Then we can have tea and cake. Just sign your name and everything will be okay." I reached out and took the pen. My hand trembled violently. I wasn't faking the adrenaline, but I exaggerated the motor control loss. I held the pen like a toddler gripping a crayon. I brought the tip of the pen down to the paper. The notary leaned in, hungry for the fee. Linda leaned in, hungry for the freedom. Tyler leaned in, hungry for the payoff. I let the pen slip. It slid from my fingers and skittered across the document, leaving a long, jagged line of black ink across the page. It fell onto the floor and rolled under the sofa. "Oops," I said, innocent as a lamb. I dropped it. Tyler made a noise in his throat like a growling dog. He dropped to his knees to retrieve the pen. Brian put his face in his hands. Linda grabbed a napkin and dabbed at the ink mark. "It is fine," she said, her voice shaking with suppressed rage. "It is just a smudge. The signature line is still clear. Give him the pen back, Oliver." Tyler shoveled the pen back into my hand. "Hold it tight," he whispered in my ear, "or I will break your fingers." I gripped the pen. I looked at the signature line. Harold J. Vance. That was my legal name. That was the name on my bank accounts. That was the name on the deed. That was the name on my passport. I took a deep breath. I let my hand hover over the paper. I started to write. I wrote slowly, painfully. The loops were shaky. The letters were uneven. H, R, O, L, D. "Good," Linda whispered. "Keep going. A, T, H, U, R." I saw Brian frown. He leaned closer. "V, A, N, C, E." I finished with a flourish, putting a period at the end. "There," I said, dropping the pen on the table. "I did it. Can I have cake now?" Linda snatched the paper up. She didn't even look at it. She just saw ink on the line. She handed it to the notary. Witnessed, Mr. Sykes said, stamping it quickly. He didn't check the ID. He didn't check the name. He just wanted to get out of there. Now the deed, Linda said, pushing the next document in front of me. I signed that one too. Harold Arthur Vance. And the bank transfer authorization. Harold Arthur Vance. They were so excited, so relieved that they were blind. They saw 3 words. They saw a signature. They didn't see the trap. You see, 40 years ago when I started my company, I had a fear of forgery. I set up a specific protocol with my legal team and the bank. My middle name is James, Harold J. Vance. But on my birth certificate, which nobody ever looks at, my middle name is actually Arthur. I hated the name Arthur. I never used it. But I told the bank explicitly, if you ever receive a document signed Harold Arthur Vance, it means I am under duress. It means I am being coerced. It is a silent alarm. It renders the document void and automatically freezes the account for fraud investigation. I had just signed 3 documents with my own distress signal, and these idiots were smiling at it. Done, Mr. Sykes said, packing his briefcase. Congratulations, Mrs. Vance. You now have power of attorney. Linda looked at the papers in her hands. She looked like she wanted to cry with relief. She leaned down and kissed me on the forehead. Her lips were cold. Thank you, Harold, she said. You did a good thing. A very good thing. Tyler stood up. He loosened his tie. He let out a long breath. Finally, he muttered. Brian didn't say anything. He just stared at the papers. He looked sick. Maybe deep down he knew something was wrong. Or maybe he just realized he had sold his soul for a signature. Can I have the cake now? I asked, looking up at them. Linda laughed. It was a harsh, brittle sound. No, Harold. The cake is for the adults. You need to go upstairs and rest. You look tired. But you promised I whined. Take him upstairs, Oliver, Linda commanded. Lock the door. We have work to do. Tyler grabbed my arm. He didn't pretend to be gentle anymore. He hauled me out of the chair. Come on, old man, he grunted. Nap time. He dragged me toward the stairs. I looked back at them. Linda was pouring champagne. Mr. Sykes was counting a stack of cash she had handed him. Brian was staring out the window. They were celebrating their victory. They were toasting to their wealth. I let Tyler drag me up the stairs. I stumbled on purpose, making him carry my weight. You are heavy, he muttered, pushing me into the bedroom. He threw me onto the bed. Stay here, he said, and don't make a sound. If I hear one peep out of you before tomorrow morning, I will come back in here with that pillow. And this time Linda won't be here to stop me. He slammed the door. I heard the lock click. I lay on the bed and listened to his footsteps fading. I waited a moment, then I smiled. A real, genuine smile. Enjoy the champagne, Linda, I whispered. Because when you try to cash those checks tomorrow morning, the only thing you are going to get is a pair of handcuffs. I rolled over and pulled the blanket up. I closed my eyes. I had signed my name. I had sealed their fate. Now all I had to do was wait for the bank to open. Tuesday morning broke with a sky as clear and hard as a diamond. At 8:30 in the morning, Linda and Tyler left the house. They were dressed for success. Linda wore a Chanel suit that I had paid for, and Tyler wore a silk tie that he had probably stolen. They carried a briefcase containing the signed documents, the deed of sale to the fake buyer, and the wire transfer authorization signed by the confused old man, Harold Arthur Vance. They locked my bedroom door from the outside before they left. Tyler yelled through the wood, telling me to stay put and be a good boy until they got back with the cake. I listened to the front door slam. I listened to the engine of the red Mustang roar to life. I listened to the silence that followed. And then I stopped pretending. I stood up from the bed. My knees did not shake. My back did not hunch. I walked to the door. I didn't need to force it. I reached into the vent cover near the floorboards, where I had hidden a spare key 3 years ago. I unlocked the door and stepped out into the hallway. The house felt different. It no longer felt like a prison. It felt like my kingdom again. I walked to the master bedroom. It smelled of them. It smelled of betrayal. I stripped off the pajamas I had been wearing for 3 days. I went into the shower and scrubbed my skin until it was red, washing away the feeling of Tyler's pillow on my face, washing away the humiliation of the soup, washing away the act. I shaved. I combed my hair back. I put on my best charcoal gray suit. I tied my tie with a perfect Windsor knot. I put on my gold cufflinks. I looked in the mirror. The old man was gone. The CEO was back. I walked downstairs to my study. I opened the humidor and took out a Cohiba Bahaik, a cigar I had been saving for a special occasion. I poured myself a glass of Macallan 25. I sat in my leather chair behind my massive oak desk. I put my feet up on the wood. I lit the cigar and watched the blue smoke curl up toward the ceiling. I checked my watch. It was 9:15. They would be arriving at the bank right about now. At the First National Bank downtown, the scene was playing out exactly as I had choreographed it. I knew this because I had spent an hour on the phone with Mr. Henderson, the bank manager, the previous night. Mr. Henderson was a good man. He had managed my accounts for 20 years. When I told him about the signature protocol, he was horrified, but he was ready. I could imagine it perfectly. Linda and Tyler walking into the lobby, projecting confidence but vibrating with anxiety. Tyler would be looking over his shoulder, watching for Vinny's enforcers. Linda would be clutching the briefcase too tightly. They would ask to see Mr. Henderson. They would present the papers. The deed of sale showing a cash influx of $5 million from the fake buyer Saul, and the transfer order moving that money plus the existing $3 million in my savings into an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. Mr. Henderson would smile. He would invite them into his glass-walled office. He would offer them coffee. He would take the papers and say he just needed to verify the signatures. And that is when the trap would spring. Because the signature on those papers was not Harold J. Vance. It was Harold Arthur Vance. To the uneducated eye, it looked like a formal variation. But in the banking system, it was a code red. It was a silent scream. It meant I am being held hostage or I am acting under duress. Mr. Henderson would type the name into the system. The screen would flash red. A silent alarm would be triggered, notifying the fraud department and the local police precinct. But Mr. Henderson would not panic. He would look up over his glasses and say something like, "There seems to be a slight system delay due to the size of the transfer. It will just be a moment." He would leave the room. He would lock the door electronically from the outside. And Linda and Tyler would sit there drinking free coffee, staring at the clock, watching the minutes tick away closer to their doom. Back at the house, I heard the front door open. It was Brian. He was late. He wasn't part of the bank run. His job was to come over and babysit me to make sure I didn't burn the house down while they were gone. I took a puff of my cigar and waited. I heard his footsteps on the stairs. He went to the guest room. I heard him try the handle. Locked. "Dad," he called out. "Dad, are you awake?" Linda said you were sleeping. I didn't answer. I heard him panic slightly. "Dad, open the door." He rattled the handle. Then he turned and ran down the hall, checking the other rooms. I swiveled my chair around, so I was facing the door of the study. Brian ran down the stairs. He burst into the study, his face pale, his breathing heavy. "Dad, I can't find—" He stopped. He froze in the doorway. He was expecting a frail, confused old man in pajamas cowering in a corner. Instead, he saw his father, dressed in a $3,000 suit, holding a cigar, a glass of scotch on the desk, eyes clear, sharp, and colder than a winter ocean. "Hello, Brian," I said. My voice was deep and steady. No tremor, no slur. Brian stared at me. His mouth opened and closed like a fish on a dock. "Dad," he whispered. "What? Why are you... You are smoking." Linda said the doctor said. "Linda says a lot of things," Brian, I interrupted. "Linda says I am senile. Linda says I am incompetent. Linda says I see spiders." I stood up. I walked around the desk. Brian took a step back. He looked terrified. "But the most interesting thing Linda said," I continued, advancing on him, "is that you agreed to help her kill me." Brian's knees gave out. He literally collapsed onto the nearest chair. "No, Dad." He stammered, tears springing to his eyes. "No, never. I never agreed to that. I just wanted the money, Dad. I owe people. Bad people. They were going to hurt me. So you decided to trade my life for yours?" I asked, standing over him. "You decided that my 40 years of hard work, my legacy, my dignity were the price you were willing to pay to fix your mistake." I took a sip of scotch. It tasted like justice. "You signed the papers, Brian. You handed me the pen. You watched me struggle. You watched them poison my soup. And you did nothing. You are not a victim. You are a coward." "Dad, please," Brian sobbed, covering his face. "I was scared. Tyler is crazy. He has a gun." "Tyler is not crazy," I said calmly. "Tyler is a con artist named Gary Slavens, and right now Gary is having a very bad day." I picked up the remote control for the wall-mounted television in the study. I turned it on. I had connected it to the security camera feed from the bank. Mr. Henderson had been kind enough to allow me remote access to the lobby camera for security verification. "Look," I said, pointing to the screen. On the screen, we saw the lobby of the First National Bank. We saw the glass office. Inside, Linda and Tyler were standing up. They were pounding on the glass. They had realized the door was locked. Tyler was throwing a chair against the wall. Linda was screaming, but we couldn't hear her. Then we saw the main doors of the bank burst open. 6 police officers in tactical gear swarmed the lobby. 2 of them had dogs. Tyler saw them. He tried to pull a weapon from his waistband, but he was too slow. The glass door shattered as the police breached the room. We watched in high definition as Tyler was tackled to the ground. We watched his face being pressed into the carpet. We watched the handcuffs snap around his wrists. Then we watched Linda. She wasn't fighting. She was standing there looking at the police, looking at Tyler, and then looking around as if wondering where her husband was to save her. She was handcuffed. An officer led her out. She looked old. The glamour was gone. She looked like exactly what she was. A woman who had bet everything on a lie and lost. Brian watched the screen in horror. He was shaking violently. Are they coming for me too?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. I looked at my son. I saw the little boy I used to teach to ride a bike, and I saw the man who had tried to bury me before I was dead. I smoked my cigar, taking my time. "That depends on you, Brian," I said. "Depends on what he asked," looking up. Hope flickering in his eyes. I pulled a document from my desk drawer. It was a confession. I had drafted it myself last night. It detailed his involvement, his debts, his complicity in the conspiracy. "You are going to sign this," I said, placing it in front of him. "You are going to confess to everything. You are going to testify against Linda and Gary. You are going to make sure they go to prison for a very long time." "I will. I will do anything," Brian promised, reaching for a pen. And then I continued. "I am going to buy your debt from the loan sharks." Brian froze. You will pay it." "I will buy it," I corrected him. "Which means you will no longer owe them. You will owe me. And I am a much harder creditor than they are." I leaned in close to his face. "You are going to work for me, Brian. Not as an executive. Not in an office. You are going to work in the warehouse. You are going to load trucks. You are going to sweep floors. You are going to work every single day until you have paid back every cent with interest. And if you miss one day, one single day, I will hand this confession to the district attorney and you will join your stepmother in a cell. Brian looked at me. He saw that I meant it. There was no love in my eyes, only the cold calculation of a businessman making a deal. He picked up the pen. His hand shook just as mine had shook when I was acting, but his fear was real. He signed. I took the paper. I folded it and put it in my pocket. Get out of my sight, Brian, I said. Be at the warehouse at 6 a.m. tomorrow. Do not be late. He stood up. He looked at the screen where his accomplices were being shoved into police cars. He looked at me one last time. I am sorry, Dad, he whispered. I didn't answer. I turned my chair around and looked out the window at the garden. I heard him leave. I heard the front door close. I was alone. The house was quiet. The pests had been exterminated. I took another puff of my cigar. I picked up the phone and dialed the bank. Mr. Henderson answered on the first ring. It is done, Mr. Vance, he said. They are in custody. The account is secure. Thank you, Robert, I said. I will be in tomorrow to sign the new signature cards. And Robert, yes, sir. From now on, let us stick to Harold J. Vance. I think Harold Arthur has caused enough trouble for one lifetime. I hung up. I sat there for a long time watching the smoke drift in the sunlight. I had won. But as I looked around the empty room, I realized that victory has a taste, and it does not taste like champagne. It tastes like ash. But ash is better than poison, and being alone is better than sleeping with the enemy. I finished my drink. I stood up. It was time to call the real estate agent. I had a house to sell, and a life to restart. The county jail smells like bleach and desperation. It is a smell I know well, not because I have spent time inside, but because I spent my youth building warehouses in neighborhoods where this smell was part of the atmosphere. I walked down the long gray corridor, my footsteps echoing on the linoleum. I was not there as a visitor. I was there as the victim who held the keys to their future. I visited Linda first. She was sitting in the interview room behind a thick pane of plexiglass. She was wearing an orange jumpsuit that was 2 sizes too big. Her hair, usually perfectly coiffed, was pulled back in a messy bun. Without her makeup and her jewelry, she looked stripped. She looked ordinary. When she saw me, she lunged forward, hitting the glass with her palms. Harold, she cried, her voice muffled by the barrier. Oh, thank God. You came. You have to get me out of here. It was all a mistake. Tyler forced me. He threatened me, Harold. I did it to save you. I sat down slowly. I placed my hands on the metal table. I looked at her. I looked for the woman I had married 10 years ago. I looked for the laughter. I looked for the warmth. All I saw was a stranger who had tried to erase me. Stop talking, Linda, I said quietly. My voice was amplified by the small speaker, but it was cold. She froze. Her eyes darted around. Harold, please. I need a lawyer, a real lawyer. The public defender they gave me is an idiot. He says I am looking at 15 years. 15 years sounds about right, I said. Attempted murder, fraud, conspiracy. It adds up. But I am your wife, she pleaded, tears streaming down her face. Doesn't that mean anything? It means everything, I replied. It means you were the one person in the world who was supposed to protect me, and instead you mixed poison into my soup. I saw the video, Linda. I saw you grinding the pills. I saw you smile when I ate it. She stopped crying. The mask fell. She looked at me with pure hatred. You were supposed to be old, she spat. You were supposed to be weak. Why couldn't you just die, Harold? You have lived long enough. I stood up. I didn't feel anger. I felt relief. The parasite was finally gone. My lawyer filed for divorce this morning, I said. You get nothing. The prenuptial agreement is ironclad in cases of infidelity and criminal activity. Goodbye, Linda. I hope you learn to like the color orange. I walked out, leaving her screaming my name. I didn't look back. I walked to the next interview room. This was the one I was dreading. Brian was sitting at the table. He wasn't handcuffed, but he looked like he was in chains. His head was in his hands. When I entered, he looked up. His eyes were red and swollen. He looked like a terrified little boy. "Dad," he whispered. I didn't sit down. I pulled a tablet from my briefcase and placed it on the table. "Watch," I said. I pressed play. It was a video from the hidden camera in the kitchen. It was from 2 nights ago. It showed Tyler holding a syringe. "We should just inject him now," Tyler said on the screen. "Get it over with." And then Brian's voice. My son's voice. "Just make it look like an accident," Brian said on the video. "I don't want to know the details. Just get it done so we can get the money." Brian watched the video. He turned pale. He looked like he was going to be sick. I turned the tablet off. "That is you, Brian," I said. "That is my son giving permission for his father to be murdered." "Dad, I was scared." Brian sobbed. I didn't mean it. I silenced him with a raised hand. "I am not going to put you in prison, Brian." Brian looked up, hope flooding his face. You aren't." "No," I said. "Prison is too easy for you. In prison you get a bed. You get food. You get to sit around and feel sorry for yourself. And the taxpayers pay for it. I am not going to let you off that easy." I pulled a file from my briefcase. I spoke to the district attorney. I told him that you were coerced. I told him that you cooperated with the investigation. He has agreed to suspend your sentence. You are free to go." Brian slumped in his chair, exhaling a massive breath. "Thank you, Dad." "Oh, thank you. I promise I will make it up to you." "I will." "I am not finished," I interrupted. I leaned in close. "You are not going to prison, Brian, but you are entering a different kind of correction facility. It is called the real world." I dropped a piece of paper on the table. "I have cut you off. The trust fund is gone. Your credit cards are canceled. The apartment I pay for is being listed for rent tomorrow. You have 24 hours to move your things out." Brian stared at me, mouth open. "But where will I live? How will I eat?" "That is up to you," I said. "You have a job waiting for you at the warehouse. Minimum wage. You start at 6 a.m. tomorrow. You will work 10-hour shifts loading crates. You will sweat. You will ache. And every paycheck you earn will go directly to me to pay off the debt I bought from your loan sharks." "But Dad," Brian stammered, "I can't live on minimum wage. I have expenses." "Then you will learn to cut them," I said. "I started with nothing, Brian. I scrubbed floors. I drove trucks. I built this empire with my own 2 hands. You wanted to inherit it without doing the work. Now you are going to learn exactly what that work feels like." I turned to the door. "You have a choice, Brian. You can show up at the warehouse tomorrow and start being a man, or you can run. But if you run, I will hand that video to the police and you will join Linda in a cell by sunset." I walked to the door. I paused and looked back at him. He looked small and broken. "I am doing this because I love you, son," I said softly. "I am saving you from yourself. Don't be late tomorrow. The trucks don't wait." I left the jail. The sun was shining outside. The air smelled of rain and asphalt. It was the smell of a new beginning. I had lost a wife and I had broken a son, but for the first time in years, I felt clean. The trial was over. The verdict was in. And now it was time to get back to work. It has been 6 months since I walked out of that county jail, leaving my son and my ex-wife to face the consequences of their greed. 6 months since I traded the suffocating silence of my Greenwich estate for the hum of an engine and the open road. I am currently parked on a ridge overlooking the Badlands in South Dakota. The sun is setting, painting the jagged rock formations in shades of purple and gold that no artist could ever hope to replicate. I am sitting in a folding chair, holding a tin mug of coffee. I am wearing a flannel shirt and jeans that are stained with a little bit of engine grease. For the first time in 40 years, I do not own a suit. And for the first time in 40 years, I am happy. I sold the mansion. The sale closed 2 weeks after the arrests. I didn't even go back to pack. I hired a company to auction off the furniture, the paintings, the crystal chandeliers. I didn't want any of it. Every object in that house was tainted with memories of lies. The money from the sale went into the trust, and I took a fraction of it to buy this. My new home is a 45-foot Prevost motor coach. It has a king-sized bed, a kitchenette, and a windshield the size of a movie screen. But the best feature is the steering wheel. If I don't like the view, I can change it. If I don't like the neighbors, I can leave. I am no longer a prisoner of my own status. Yesterday, I met someone. Her name is Catherine. She is 66 years old, a retired school teacher from Vermont. She is parked 2 spots down in a modest Airstream trailer. She walked over while I was struggling to connect my water line, and without saying a word, she handed me a wrench and showed me the trick to getting the seal tight. We drank coffee by her fire pit last night. She didn't ask me what I used to do for a living. She didn't glance at my watch to see if it was a Rolex. She didn't ask about my investment portfolio. She asked me what my favorite book was. She asked me if I had ever seen the redwoods in California. We talked for 3 hours, and not once did I feel the need to protect myself. Catherine has laugh lines around her eyes, deeply etched grooves that show she has spent a lifetime smiling. Linda had spent thousands of dollars erasing every line on her face trying to freeze time. Catherine wears her history proudly. Looking at her, I realized how starved I had been for something real. I haven't told her about my money. I haven't told her about the company I built, or the millions in the bank. To her, I am just Harold, a guy traveling the country, trying to figure out the second act of his life. And that is exactly who I want to be. Maybe tomorrow I will ask her if she wants to drive in a caravan to Yellowstone. Maybe she will say yes. Maybe she will say no, but whatever she says, it will be the truth. And that is a luxury I haven't been able to afford in a long time. I checked my email this morning. There was a notification from the payroll department of my old logistics company. It was a receipt for a garnishment of wages. Brian has been working at the warehouse for 6 months. He hasn't missed a shift. The supervisor tells me he looks tired and he has lost weight, but he shows up. He is loading trucks. He is sweating for his money. I didn't reply to the email. I just deleted it. I don't hate Brian anymore. I don't feel much of anything for him. He is on his own path now. Maybe the hard work will make a man out of him. Maybe it won't. But that is no longer my burden to carry. I gave him life and then I gave him a lesson. The rest is up to him. As for Linda, I heard through Leonard that she took a plea deal. She is serving 5 years in a minimum security facility upstate. I suppose she finally got what she wanted. A place where she doesn't have to work, where her meals are prepared for her, and where she is surrounded by people who are just as morally bankrupt as she is. The sun has dipped below the horizon now. The air is getting cold. I stand up and stretch. My back aches a little, but it is a good ache. It is the ache of living, not the ache of decaying. I pour the rest of my coffee onto the ground, a small libation to the man I used to be. Harold, the CEO, is dead. He died in that house along with his illusions. The man standing here is just Harold. I look at the keys in my hand. I have a full tank of gas. I have a map with 100 circled destinations. I have a new friend who likes black coffee and books. I realized something profound out here on the road. I spent 50 years building a fortress of money to keep the world out, but I ended up locking myself in with the wrong people. I thought wealth was freedom, but it was just a golden cage. I put the key in the ignition, and the engine roars to life. It sounds like a heartbeat, strong, steady, unstoppable. I lost a fake family to find myself. The price of 50 years of labor for the ultimate betrayal was expensive. It cost me my heart, my trust, and my home. But looking at this endless horizon under a blanket of stars, I realized that the ledger is finally balanced. Because freedom at 69 is priceless. This is Harold Vance signing off. If you are listening to this and you feel trapped by the people who claim to love you, remember my story. Check the locks. Check the bank accounts. But most importantly, check your own happiness. It is never too late to drive away. Thank you for listening.